All I wanted was to make some money. Then I signed a marriage contract worth millions. The wife for hire was an Ice Queen CEO, and the terms and conditions were longer than my 5-year plan. I figured it was a simple transaction, but somehow every normal thing I did, they saw as the masterstroke of a brilliant tycoon. Everyone was convinced I had some secret identity, and even my contract wife started looking at me funny. Seriously, I'm just a regular guy who wants to take the money and run. A 3-year contractual marriage. $100,000 a month with a $1 million annual bonus. Party A and Party B will maintain separate bedrooms. Party B is forbidden from touching, hugging, or kissing Party A. Both parties are forbidden from engaging in extramarital affairs, flirtatious behavior, or suggestive online messaging. I stared at the 18 clauses of this ridiculously one-sided prenuptial agreement and almost laughed. No one in their right mind would sign this. So I signed it. Money is money. Across from me, the woman they called the Ice Queen of Commerce, Isabella Sterling, was sizing me up. She wore a tailored white pantsuit, her long hair pulled back in a severe bun that showed off a smooth forehead and a graceful neck. She was beautiful in a way that had no warmth, a sharp-edged beauty that kept everyone at a distance. "Mr. Evans, have you finished reading?" Her voice was as cold as her reputation. I nodded, picked up the pen, and scrawled my name with a flourish on the line for Party B. All set. I slid the contract back across the table, my movements clean and efficient. Isabella picked it up, inspecting my signature with a flicker of surprise at how quickly I'd agreed. For the first time, a ripple of emotion crossed her otherwise placid eyes. "You don't have any questions?" "Nope," I said. As long as the pay was good, nothing else mattered. The contract was black and white, clearer than any employment agreement I'd ever signed. Party A, Isabella Sterling. Party B, Leo Evans. Rights and responsibilities laid out perfectly. I play her husband to fend off a family-arranged merger, and she pays me. In 3 years, we go our separate ways. I walk away with enough cash to retire early and live the simple, lazy life I'd always dreamed of. What wasn't to like? "Aren't you afraid this is some kind of trap?" Isabella leaned forward slightly, tried to read something on my face. I met her gaze without flinching and offered a small smile. "Ms. Sterling, you're a billionaire. I'm a guy with a negative net worth. What did you possibly want from me?" My maxed-out credit cards. That seemed to shut her up. A tiny crack appeared in her icy facade. She'd probably never met a business partner who went so completely off script. She was silent for a few seconds before her cool composure returned. "Very well. Since you've signed a contract, I expect you to be professional. You'll move into my house today. To the public, we are a loving couple. In private, you will remember your place." "Understood. I'm your employee. You're my boss," I said agreeably. Isabella seemed satisfied with my quick uptake. She nodded, then pulled a black credit card from her purse and slid it across the table. "This is your advance and for daily expenses. No pin. Buy whatever you need. Don't embarrass me." I looked down at the gleaming black card, and my heart skipped a beat. Was this the legendary no-limit Centurion card? I forced down a surge of excitement, channeling an air of someone who'd seen it all before. I pinched the card between 2 fingers, gave a little spin like I'd seen a movie once, and slipped it into my pocket. "Thanks, boss." My casual move seemed to throw her for another loop. She probably expected me to start babbling excitedly, or at least act a little starstruck. I didn't either. To her, my calmness must have looked like the composure of a man who'd weathered real storms. Only I knew that I had almost fumbled the card and sent it flying across the room. "Arthur, my house manager, will pick you up and help you move. You don't have much, I assume?" she asked. "Not much. Just a backpack," I replied. The corner of Ms. Sterling's mouth twitched almost imperceptibly. "Fina. Excellent." She stood up. "I hope our partnership is a pleasant one." "Likewise, boss." Watching her click away on her high heels, I let out a long breath and slumped back in the chair, feeling like I was in a dream. Starting today, I was officially playing the part of Tycoon's husband. And I'm a damn good actor. After all, smiling at your boss every day and saying, "That's a great point," is its own kind of performance. Now, I was just on a different stage, with a ridiculously high salary. This was a win. Half an hour later, a black Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled up in front of the crumbling, lower-end apartment building I called home. A middle-aged man in a black suit and white gloves got out. This had to be Arthur. When Arthur saw me and the dilapidated building behind me, a complex look flashed in his eyes. He didn't show a hint of disdain, though. Instead, he bowed respectfully. Mr. Evans, I am Arthur. Ms. Sterling sent me to collect you. Appreciate it, Arthur, I said politely, slinging my faded backpack over my shoulder. It contained all my worldly possessions, a few changes of clothes, a portable charger, and a well-worn copy of Stanislavski's An Actor Prepares. Arthur insisted on taking my bag, but I held on to it. He didn't press the issue, simply walking behind me to open the car door. Sliding into the luxury car, I was hit by the faint scent of leather and some kind of expensive air freshener. The ride was completely silent, a world away from the rattling city bus I usually took. On the way, Arthur kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror. I could feel his eyes on me, but I didn't care. I just watched the city blur past the window, calculating whether I should buy a small house on Lake Michigan with my $30 million or move back to my hometown and open a small convenience store. The car finally entered a heavily guarded, gated community. The houses here were set far apart, with landscaping that looked more like a national park. The Rolls-Royce stopped in front of the most impressive mansion of them all. We've arrived, Mr. Evans. I got out and stared at the massive house, which had to be at least 10,000 square feet. I felt a little dazed. This was my home for the next 3 years? Arthur led me through the front door, across a courtyard big enough to land a helicopter in, and into the house. The interior was decorated in a style I didn't understand, but could tell was insanely expensive. A soaring grand foyer, a massive crystal chandelier, a spiral staircase. It was all straight out of a movie. Mr. Evans, your room is on the second floor, adjacent to Ms. Sterling's. She instructed that your room be furnished to the same standard as the master suite, to avoid any unnecessary complications. Arthur explained as he led the way. I nodded. Separate rooms. It was in the contract. Professional ethics. My new room was absurdly large, with its own walk-in closet, an en-suite bathroom, and a balcony overlooking the gardens. Arthur placed my backpack on a luggage rack and stood by respectfully. Is there anything else you require, Mr. Evans? I looked around. The room had everything, better equipped than a 5-star hotel. I shook my head. No, this is great. Then I walked over to a heavy mahogany desk that looked like it cost more than my car. I noticed one of the legs was slightly uneven, causing the surface to wobble when I touched it. My obsessive-compulsive side kicked in. I bent down, took a closer look, and then rummaged through my tattered backpack. After a moment, I found a few folded paper napkins I'd saved from a fast food joint. I folded a piece into the perfect thickness and wedged it precisely into the gap under the table leg. I gave the desk a little shake, solid as a rock. Satisfied, I clapped the dust off my hands and stood up. When I turned around, I saw Arthur staring at me with an expression of utter shock and profound admiration. His mouth was slightly agape, as if he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. The look in his eyes was no longer just respectful. It was something closer to awe. I was baffled. All I did was fix a wobbly table. What was the big deal? Of course, I had no idea about the tidal wave crashing through Arthur's mind. He had been with Isabella Sterling for years and had met countless so-called young talents and business elites. When those people came here, they either couldn't hide their awkwardness and greed or put on a false front of calm. But me, Leo Evans, had acted with a supreme sense of normalcy from the moment I walked in. Faced with this incredible wealth, I was completely unfazed. Faced with this luxurious room, the first thing I did wasn't to admire the priceless antique vase or test out the $100,000 mattress. Instead, I had personally, with the humblest of materials, solved the most minor of problems. To Arthur, this wasn't just fixing a table. This was a state of being, a state of returning to simplicity, where the greatest skill appears to be no skill at all. He believed I was using this action to silently inform them. No matter how luxurious the surroundings, I focus only on the essence of things. A table must first be stable. A man must first stand firm. It was both a warning and a declaration. In that instant, his mind composed a 1,000,000-word epic about a great master walking amongst mortals. I, Leo Evans, was definitely not the orphan drowning in debt that my file claimed. I had to be a top-tier tycoon from some hidden, powerful family, out experiencing life or undertaking a special mission. This time Sterling had truly hit the jackpot. Mr. Evans, Arthur's voice trembled slightly. Your wisdom is truly immeasurable. I said. What did fixing a table have to do with wisdom? Seeing the look on Arthur's face that screamed, I get it. I decided to just keep my mouth shut. Maybe this was just how rich people were. They could find the meaning of life in a wobbly table leg. Fine by me. You guys can think whatever you want. I just want my 30 million. That evening, Isabella came home. She took off her heels, and the intimidating aura around her softened a bit, but her expression was still cold. Are you settling in all right? She asked. It wasn't a question of concern, more like a routine check-in. It's great. The room is huge. The bed is soft. I answered honestly. She grunted in response and walked straight to the dining room. A lavish dinner was already laid out on the long table. A 4-course meal prepared by a private chef. We sat across from each other, separated by 10 feet of polished wood. The atmosphere was a little awkward. Neither of us spoke during the meal. I just focused on eating. This stuff was way better than the takeout I was used to. Isabella just picked at her salad, occasionally glancing up at me. I could feel her gaze, but I pretended not to notice. The contract didn't say we had to make small talk during dinner. I was a professional employee. I didn't provide services outside my contract. Just then, the doorbell rang. Arthur went to get it and returned a moment later with a young man in a loud floral shirt, his hair slicked back with too much gel. Chad! Isabella's brow furrowed when she saw him. Izzy, baby, I heard you got married. Why didn't you tell the family? As your big cousin, I had to come see what kind of man swept you off your feet. The man, Chad, directed his words to her, but his eyes landed on me, full of undisguised provocation and contempt. This was Chadwick Vance, Isabella's cousin, a guy who had always been after her position and her looks. He was one of the main problems this whole marriage contract was supposed to solve. Chad swaggered to the table, pulled out a chair, and sat down, his eyes raking over me. So this is my new cousin-in-law? You look pretty average. His tone dripped with mockery. I was in the middle of chewing a piece of braised short rib. I looked up at him, then went back to my plate, spearing a piece of asparagus. Arguing with a guy like this would just ruin my appetite. My silence, to Chad, was a sign of weakness and guilt. His smirk widened. What's the matter, buddy? Cat got your tongue? Or are you just too scared to speak? Isabella's face darkened. Chad, this is my home. Show some respect. Respect? Oh, Izzy, you're so naive. You pull some random guy off the street and call him your husband? You're humiliating both the Vance and the Sterling families. Grandfather knows, and he is furious. Chad slammed his hand on the table. I finally swallowed my food and wiped my mouth with a napkin. Then I looked at Chad and asked in all seriousness, have you eaten yet? Chad froze. Isabella froze. Even Arthur, standing by, ready to intervene, froze. They probably expected me to get angry or defensive. No one expected me to ask such a down-to-earth question. Chad's face turned beet red. What? What did you just say? Nothing. Just asking. If you haven't eaten, you're welcome to join us. I gestured to the food. It's pretty good, especially the short ribs. I thought I heard Arthur choke back a laugh, but he suppressed it quickly. Chad looked like he'd been mortally insulted. He thought I was using some kind of verbal judo to ignore his challenge, treating him like a freeloader who'd shown up for a free meal. Who wants to eat your food? He shot up, pointing a finger at my nose. You listen to me. You're not good enough for Izzy. If you know what's good for you, you'll take the money and get lost. I looked at him and sighed. Then, very deliberately, I pulled the platter of short ribs closer to my side of the table, protectively. That single action completely broke him. But to the onlookers, especially the master interpreter, Arthur, this series of moves was nothing short of genius. Faced with Chad's arrogance, Mr. Evans showed no anger, no rebuttal. The first question, have you eaten yet, seemed simple, but was in fact a declaration of dominance. This is my house, my table. I am the host. You're merely a guest. The second statement, it's pretty good, especially the short ribs, was an even deeper cut, implying, your shouting has no effect on me. My world remains peaceful, the food delicious. Your tantrum is nothing but the buzz of a fly. And the final act of guarding the food was the masterstroke. He wasn't protecting a plate of ribs. He was protecting Ms. Sterling. He was using that motion to tell Chad, Isabella is mine. Don't even think about it. Just like these short ribs, what's mine is mine, and no one can take it away. What incredible confidence. What effortless composure. This was the mark of a true master. He disdained verbal sparring, using a single glance, a single motion, to utterly crush his opponent. Arthur's gaze shifted from awe to pure, unadulterated worship. Isabella was also staring at me, stunned. She had been preparing a whole speech to deal with Chad, but my simple actions had completely deflated him. He was like a boxer who had thrown his strongest punch only to hit a pillow, leaving him frustrated and red-faced. You people. Fine. Just fine. Chad sputtered, pointing at both of us before finally landing on a threat. You just wait. With that, he stormed out. Silence returned to the mansion. I looked at the platter of miraculously saved short ribs, relieved, and took another piece. Delicious. Isabella started, then stopped. What's up, boss? I asked. Why? Why did you do that? She was genuinely curious. Oh, he was getting so worked up, I was afraid he was going to flip the table. I said honestly, these short ribs are really good. It would have been a shame to waste them. Isabella was silent. She picked up her fork, took a piece of the short rib, and chewed it slowly. After a long moment, she said quietly, they are pretty good. I don't know if she believed me. But from that day on, the way she looked at me changed again. There was something new in her eyes, something I couldn't quite decipher. A mix of curiosity and admiration. Chad's humiliating retreat meant that my name, Leo Evans, began to circulate for the first time among the Sterling and Vance family circles. The rumors were varied, but the core message was the same. The man Isabella Sterling found was not to be trifled with. Some said I was a man of extraordinary composure, facing Chad's provocations with a calm smile. Others whispered that I had a mysterious background, perhaps the scion of some hidden dynasty who didn't even see the Van Cess as worthy of notice. The primary source of these rumors, our in-house interpreter of greatness, Arthur, added his own dramatic flair when he reported the short rib incident to Isabella's grandfather, Mr. Sterling, Sr. Apparently, after hearing Arthur's in-depth analysis, the old man stroked his chin, sat in silence for a long time, and said only one thing. Let's wait and see. Those 4 words only served to make my image in everyone's mind that much more profound and mysterious. I, of course, knew none of this. I just continued my routine work life. I'd read books in a mansion, work out, or just sunbathe in the garden and contemplate my future. This life of getting paid to do nothing was the dream. The only downside was that it was a little boring. One day, Isabella came home from work looking even colder than usual. Get changed. You're coming with me to a gala tonight, she ordered. What kind of gala? My grandfather's 80th birthday. My heart skipped a beat. Meeting the family? This was the big leagues. Boss does this. Cost extra. I asked tentatively. Isabella gave me a look like I was an idiot. Your $100,000 monthly salary includes these social obligations. If you perform well, your annual bonus could be increased to $1.2 million. Mission accepted. I immediately stood up straight. For money, I could do anything. Arthur quickly brought me a top-of-the-line, custom-tailored suit. After I changed, I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. It's true what they say. The clothes make the man. In a t-shirt and jeans, I was just a guy. In this suit, I actually looked like someone important. When Isabella saw me, she paused for a moment. Acceptable, she said curtly, then offered me her arm. It took me a second to understand. She wanted me to escort her. I carefully reached out and looped my arm through hers, maintaining a safe, professional distance. Clause 2. Forbidden from touching, hugging, or kissing party A. I was an employee with a strong work ethic. My gentlemanly distance made Isabella stiffen for a split second. She turned her head and gave me a complicated look. To her, my restrained, proper behavior was probably just more evidence of the high-class breeding of a man from a top-tier family. She had no idea I was just terrified of getting my pay docked. The gala was held at the old Sterling family estate, a sprawling, historic manor even larger and more classic than Isabella's mansion. When we arrived, The place was already filled with a glittering crowd of guests. The moment I appeared with Isabella on my arm, we became the center of attention. 100 pairs of eyes, curious, searching, jealous, disdainful, shot toward me. I felt like a new exhibit at the zoo. On the outside, I kept a calm smile plastered on my face. On the inside, I was chanting a mantra. Don't panic. They're all NPCs. They're just background characters. Is that Isabella's mystery husband? He looks pretty sharp. I wonder which family he's from. Oomph. Putting on an act. He's just a pretty boy, I bet. The whispers were just loud enough for me to hear. Isabella's body tensed. She'd heard them too. I gently patted the back of her hand and whispered, "Don't worry about it, boss. Let them talk. We're still getting paid." My voice was low, but she heard me. She flinched, then whipped her head around to look at me. I thought I'd said the wrong thing, but I saw the ice in her eyes melt just a little, and the corner of her mouth twitched into a barely perceptible smile. "Right," she whispered back. We made our way to the head of the room to meet the patriarch of the Sterling family. Mr. Sterling, Signor, was dressed in a sharp tuxedo, looking vigorous and imposing as he sat in a large wingback chair. "Grandfather," Isabella said respectfully. "Oomph." The old man nodded, his sharp eyes landing on me. "So you're Leo Evans?" "Yes, grandfather," I said, mimicking Isabella's respectful tone. Not bad. You clean up well," the old man said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I hear you're quite the capable young man." I knew it. The main event was starting. Just then, Chad and his father, a shrewd-looking man who was Isabella's uncle by marriage, walked over. "Dad, don't let him fool you. He's a broke nobody. I don't know what kind of spell he's cast on Izzy," Chad instigated. Isabella's uncle chuckled. "Sir, it's wonderful that the young people are getting married, but we should know who we're dealing with. As it happens, I have a project on the west side that's run into a bit of trouble. Perhaps our nephew Leo here could offer us old-timers a bit of his wisdom." Oh, great. It was a setup. Every eye in the room was on me, waiting for me to make a fool of myself. The palm of Isabella's hand, resting on my arm, was slick with nervous sweat. I was panicking internally. West Side Project? What the hell was that? I barely knew which way was west, but I couldn't back down. Not with a $1.2 million bonus on the line. I took a deep breath, my mind racing. What could I do? Fake it? They'd see right through me. Humbly admit, I don't know. That would just confirm I was a fraud. In that split second, thought struck me. I remembered the book in my backpack, next to Stanislavski. It was one of those airport bestsellers by some guru, titled something like Primal Code, The Alpha Investor's Mindset. And I remembered one line from it very clearly. So, meeting everyone's gaze, I smiled faintly and spoke slowly. I didn't answer the question about the project directly. Instead, I said something that silenced the entire room. Strip away the noise, and the signal is always simple. My voice wasn't loud, but every word carried. After dropping that line, I shut my mouth, picked up a nearby glass of water, took a slow sip, and adopted an expression that said, "I have spoken. It is up to you to understand." The room was dead silent. Everyone was completely baffled by my cryptic, context-free statement. Isabella's uncle, the sharp businessman, was frowning, repeating the words "signal is always simple" under his breath. Chad just looked confused, like I'd started speaking another language. Mr. Sterling, Sr., was staring at me, his sharp eyes filled with shock and deep thought. Even Isabella was looking at me in a new, disbelieving way. My heart was pounding. My palms were sweating. Folks, that's all I've got. How you interpret it is up to you. Just please, for the love of God, don't ask a follow-up question. Thankfully, no one did. They were all too busy pondering the profound wisdom I had just imparted. After a long moment, Isabella's uncle suddenly slapped his thigh, his face lighting up with dawning comprehension. I get it, he said excitedly. The signal is always simple. Of course, we've been overcomplicating things. The biggest problem with the West Side Project is the compensation for the holdouts, right? We've been doing appraisals, negotiations, legal threats, making it so complex. But the simplest method is to just meet their core demand. Give them the money they want, a clean, one-time solution. Yes, that's it. He then turned to me and bowed deeply. My dear nephew, hearing you speak is better than 10 years of business school. Thank you for your guidance. I just stood there, speechless. Wait, dude, that's not what I meant. Before I could even try to explain, Mr. Sterling, Sr. slowly got to his feet. He walked over to me and clapped me firmly on the shoulder. Excellent. The signal is always simple. Excellent. His voice boomed. Isabella, your judgment is better than all of us old fools combined. This grandson-in-law has my approval. The room erupted in murmurs. And just like that, with one bullshit line from paperback book, I had successfully pulled off the biggest bluff of my life and won the approval of a powerful patriarch. I looked at Isabella, who was now gazing at me with pure admiration, and then at the crowd of people who were suddenly looking at me with newfound respect. This world, I decided, was completely insane. What I didn't know was that from that moment on, in their circle, the name Mr. Evans was no longer just a name. It was a legend. The simple signal incident hit the city's upper crust like a bombshell. Overnight, Leo Evans was elevated from a kept man of unknown origin to a reclusive master with profound skills. The craziest part? 3 days later, news broke that the West Side Project, a headache that had plagued the Sterling family for months, was actually resolved. Isabella's uncle had taken my advice, brutally and efficiently increased the buyout offers, and all the problems vanished. It cost more money up front, but getting the project moving saved them far more than the extra payout. And so, the legend became fact. Everyone was now convinced that I was a strategic genius who could see the essence of any problem and simplify the complex. I could feel the gardeners watching me with reverence as I walked through the grounds of the mansion. I was just trying to decide what to have for lunch. Arthur's gaze had upgraded from worship to outright devotion. He served me tea every day with the kind of solemnity usually reserved for a religious ceremony. One time I casually remarked, "Nice weather today, Arthur." He immediately stood at attention. "Indeed, Mr. Evans. Are you suggesting that we should act in accordance with the times and grasp the bigger picture?" "I understand. I will remind Ms. Sterling that with the recent market volatility, it is a time for calm observation, not rash action." I just stared at him. I was just making small talk about the weather. Isabella's attitude toward me did a complete 180. She stopped speaking to me in that commanding, evaluative tone. Instead, she started asking for my opinion. "Leo, what do you think of this new investment product our firm is launching?" she'd ask, holding out a prospectus with a serious expression. I don't know the first thing about investment products. All I could do was stick to my brand. I took the file, didn't even glance at it, and said, "Back to basics." Isabella nodded thoughtfully. "I see. You're saying the product design is too flashy, too many gimmicks. We should return to the core principle, the rate of return. Get rid of the complicated clauses and freebies and just offer the clients the most straightforward competitive interest rate." "The boss is wise," I said, effortlessly handing the credit back to her. Sure enough, they revised the product, launched it, and it became a massive success, their bestseller of the year. Isabella started looking at me with even more intensity. I felt like they were going to force me into becoming a real guru. The pressure of constantly having to fake being a genius was getting to me. I started to miss my old life of eating instant ramen and playing video games in my crappy apartment. It was a poor life, but it was a free one. To de-stress, I decided to find a hobby. I noticed an unused patch of land in the backyard and asked Arthur for some tools and seeds. I was going to start a small vegetable garden. This move, once again, stunned everyone. In their eyes, this reclusive master was going to personally till the soil. What could it mean? Arthur's brain went into overdrive. "Mr. Evans is teaching us a lesson. Food in the hand, no panic in the heart. No matter how successful our enterprise, we must never forget our foundation. Agriculture is the bedrock of civilization. Ms. Sterling, I recommend our company begin exploring investments in modern agricultural technology." Isabella nodded in solemn agreement. The next day, she formed a new team to research agri-tech ventures. I just wanted to grow some green onions to throw in my ramen. So I spent my days with a hoe in my hands, tilling, watering, and fertilizing. It was sweaty work, but I enjoyed it. One afternoon, I was shirtless, working hard in my new garden, when Isabella came home early. She stood at the edge of the patch, dressed in a sharp business suit, a stark contrast to my dirt-streaked image. She just watched me quietly for a while. I felt a little self-conscious and wiped the sweat from my brow with a towel. Hey, boss. Home early? Yes, she nodded. Then she did something I never expected. She slipped off her expensive high heels and barefoot, carefully stepped into the tilled earth. Can I try? She asked softly, looking at the hoe in my hand. I was stunned. Was this the same Ice Queen CEO? I handed her the hoe. She clumsily tried to imitate my movements, but after 2 swings, she was breathing heavily. A smudge of dirt on her pale cheek somehow made her seem more real, less distant. I didn't laugh. I just quietly took the hoe back and showed her the proper way to stand and use her strength. Under the setting sun, in a small vegetable patch, a shirtless farmer and a barefoot hoe stood side by side, turning over the soil. The scene was bizarre, but also strangely harmonious. Why? Did you want to plant a garden? She finally asked. It feels real, I said, looking down at the earth. Watching something sprout and grow and produce something. It makes you feel like life has a purpose. It's not like your world. That's all just numbers and concepts. It's too abstract. I was speaking from the heart. But to Isabella, it was just another profound, simple signal philosophy. She stopped working and stared at me, a light I had never seen before shining in her eyes. Real, she murmured. You're right. I don't think I've ever felt real. In that moment, I felt like the wall of ice between us had melted just a little bit more. And I had the strange feeling that maybe, just maybe, there was more to this job than just the money. After we started the garden together, my relationship with Isabella entered a strange new phase. She was no longer just the high and mighty boss, and I was no longer just a guy getting paid to do a job. We started talking more. Mostly, it was still her asking questions and me answering with my signature brand of homespun BS. She'd ask, how do you always stay so calm? I'd answer by not thinking too much, and she would fall into a deep contemplation, convinced those 4 words contained the profound wisdom of minimalism and living in the moment. In reality, my brain just didn't have the bandwidth for complicated stuff. She started trying to enter my world. She'd trade her power suits for casual clothes and help me water the vegetables. She had me take her to the ramen truck I used to go to, the one that served $6 bowls of spicy noodles. The first time she sat on one of those greasy plastic stools, her eyes watering from the spice as she declared it the best thing she'd ever eaten, I saw her break into a genuine, unguarded smile. It was 100 times more beautiful than the official corporate smile she gave on the financial news when her company went public. Arthur saw all this and was deeply concerned. He thought I was leading Miss Sterling astray, away from her corporate duties. But he didn't dare say anything, because every time Isabella returned from one of our forays into the normal world, she was in an amazing mood, and her work productivity shot through the roof. So, Arthur just doubled down on his theory. Mr. Evans was tempering Ms. Sterling's spirit, allowing her to experience the joys and sorrows of the common world so she could better command her vast fortune. Brilliant. Simply brilliant. I didn't know any of that. I just knew that Isabella was getting clingy. Before, she couldn't stand to be within 10 feet of me. Now, she was constantly manufacturing reasons for us to touch. At dinner, she would naturally put food on my plate. You've gotten thin from all that gardening. When we watched TV, she would sit closer and closer to me until I could smell the shampoo in her hair. It was making me nervous. Clause 3. No flirtatious behavior. Boss, you're tempting me to violate my contract. That's a finable offense. I started trying to subtly avoid her. She'd take a step forward. I'd take a step back. But my avoidance was, of course, interpreted as something else entirely. She thought I was reminding her of our agreement, testing her to see if her feelings were genuine or just a passing whim. So she started pursuing me even more aggressively. One night, I was reading in my room when I heard a knock. I opened the door to find Isabella standing there in a silk nightgown. She was holding a glass of red wine, and her cheeks were flushed. Leo, I can't sleep. Can we talk? Her eyes seemed a little unfocused. It was obvious she'd been drinking. Boss, you've had too much. You should get some rest, I said, trying to close the door. She blocked it with her hand. No, she said, a hint of a pout in her voice. I want to talk to you. This was a nightmare. If Arthur saw this, my reputation would be ruined. I had no choice but to let her in. She stumbled into the room and collapsed onto my sofa with a long sigh. Leo, you know what? Today, I crushed another one of my uncle's projects, she said to the ceiling. Oh yeah? That's great, boss. You're a killer, I said, trying to sound supportive. They're all afraid of me. They all think I'm ruthless, that I'd turn on my own family, she whispered, her voice thick with hurt. But if I'm not like that, they'll devour what little my mother and I built. I stayed quiet. The drama of the rich was more complicated than I'd thought. Only you, she suddenly said, turning her head to lock her blazing eyes on me. Only you aren't afraid of me. You're the only one who treats me like a normal person. Boss, you're mistaken. I'm mostly afraid of you docking my pay, I muttered under my breath. You're always saying these strange things, but I know you're just trying to enlighten me in your own way, she continued, ignoring me. She pushed herself up from the sofa and started walking toward me. I backed away nervously until my back hit the cold wall. Boss, calm down. We have a contract. I held up my hands defensively. She stopped right in front of me. We were so close I could see her long eyelashes and the reflection of my own panicked face in her eyes. Leo, she asked softly, if there was no contract, could you, like me? That question was way above my pay grade. My mind went blank. Like her? I didn't know. I just knew that the woman standing in front of me was a completely different person from the cold corporate machine I had first met. She could laugh and cry and act stubborn and clumsily try to plant vegetables. She was a huge pain, but she wasn't so bad. While I was frozen, she stood on her tiptoes and gently pressed her lips against mine. Soft, warm, with a hint of red wine. I felt like I'd been struck by lightning. I just stood there completely rigid. It was over. Clause 2 violated. Forbidden from touching, hugging, or kissing party A. Even though she started it, I didn't pull away. How much was this going to cost me? My first thought wasn't about the kiss. It was about my year-end bonus. Seeing the look of utter despair on my face, Isabella froze. She probably expected me to kiss her back, or at least push her away. She never, in a million years, expected me to look like I'd just seen a ghost. The haze of wine and vulnerability in her eyes vanished, replaced by that familiar, icy shield. I see, she said, taking a step back. Her voice trembled. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done that. Then she turned and practically fled from my room. I watched her retreating back, then touched my lips. I think I really screwed this up. After that night, the temperature between Isabella and me dropped below freezing. She reverted to the Ice Queen CEO, only colder than before. We lived in the same house, but could go an entire day without speaking. She no longer put food on my plate at dinner. If we passed in the living room, she would give a curt nod and head straight upstairs. The atmospheric pressure in the mansion was suffocating. Arthur saw it all and was beside himself with anxiety. He didn't dare ask what happened, but he kept shooting me looks that said, "You fool." In his mind, this had to be Mr. Evans's ultimate test for Miss Sterling. He was playing hard to get, letting her taste warmth only to snatch it away, forcing her to realize the value of true love. Mr. Evans was a master of romance, a terrifyingly brilliant strategist. I was being framed. All I cared about was my money. I tried to talk to her a few times to explain that I wasn't rejecting her, that I was just shocked. But the words always died in my throat. How could I explain? Sorry, boss. My mind was just consumed with calculating the financial penalty for violating our contract. That would be worse. I was miserable. To make things worse, I realized I was starting to worry about her. Did she eat today? She looked exhausted when she came home. Are those dark circles under her eyes? Is she not sleeping? A horrible truth dawned on me. I was actually falling for my boss. This was far more dangerous than losing my bonus. While I was wrestling with my feelings, a real crisis was brewing. Chad Vance, the floral shirt cousin I had humiliated, had never forgiven me. He couldn't dig up any dirt on my background, so he concluded I was just a clever con man. He decided to expose me and cripple Isabella's company at the same time through a sophisticated attack on the stock market. He teamed up with a few disgruntled board members and a foreign hedge fund to orchestrate a massive short-selling campaign against Sterling Industries. It came out of nowhere. One afternoon, the company's stock price began to plummet. Negative headlines popped up everywhere. Proprietary tech leaked. Financials falsified. Executive exodus. A mix of truth and lies created a storm of market panic. Isabella rushed back to the office for an emergency meeting. I was left alone in the empty mansion, watching the relentless downward slope of the green line on the financial news, my stomach twisting into a knot. I didn't know much about finance, but I knew this was bad. For 3 days, Isabella didn't come home. She was living at the office, a machine wound tight, running on fumes. Arthur brought her meals every day and came back sighing. Ms. Sterling hasn't slept in 2 days. She's living on coffee. The stock is still falling. The board is calling for her resignation, and that weasel Chad Vance is fanning the flames. Arthur's eyes were red. Hearing this, I felt sick. What could I do? If I went to the office, I'd just be in the way. My half-baked philosophies were worthless against a real financial assault. For the first time, I felt truly powerless. I wasn't some reclusive master. I was just a normal, kind of useless contract husband. On the 4th night, a thunderstorm rolled in. I sat in the living room, watching the lightning flash, my mind a mess. At 2 a.m, the front door opened. Isabella was back. She was soaked to the bone, her face as white as paper. She staggered into the living room without taking off her shoes and then, without warning, collapsed. Boss! I lunged forward and caught her just before she hit the floor. Her skin was burning up, her forehead slick with cold sweat. She had a fever. I swept her into my arms. It was the first time I had ever held her like this. She was so light it hurt. I carried her to her room and laid her on the bed. Her room was just like her, cold, minimalist, impeccably neat. I found a first aid kit and took her temperature, 102.5, a high fever. I wiped her down with a cool cloth and found some fever reducer, prying open her lips to get the pills down. She was muttering deliriously. Can't lose. I can't lose. It's what my mother left me. Now, don't go. That last part felt like a punch to the gut. I sat by her bed all night, not sleeping a wink. The next morning, her fever had broken slightly, but she was still unconscious. I looked at her exhausted face and made a decision. I couldn't just stand by anymore. Even if I didn't know anything, I had to do something, even if it was just making sure she could eat a decent meal and get some real rest. I went downstairs to the kitchen. It was my first time using the professional-grade setup. I opened a massive refrigerator, which was filled with gourmet ingredients I didn't recognize. I decided to make the simplest thing I could think of, chicken noodle soup. Where I'm from, when you're sick, a bowl of hot soup is the best thing for you. I found the ingredients, put a pot on the stove, and let it simmer slowly. The comforting aroma began to fill the kitchen. Just then, my phone rang. An unknown number. I answered. A smug voice on the other end said, Leo Evans? This is Chad Vance. My jaw tightened. What do you want? Your meal ticket is about to expire. You know that. Chad laughed. 3 p.m. Today is her final deadline. If she can't come up with $500 million to prop up the stock, her company goes into liquidation. She'll be left with nothing. And you, her little boy toy, will be out on the street. 500 million? My heart sank. Why are you telling me this? I asked coldly. No reason. Just wanted to give you a heads up. Oh, and my advice? Get out now. When the debt collectors come for a bankrupt Isabella Sterling, they won't care if you're her husband or not. His laughter was pure poison. I hung up and stared at the simmering soup. 500 million. For Isabella right now, it was an impossible sum. The company's credit lines were frozen, the banks wouldn't touch her, and the board members were sharks circling. Where could she get that kind of money? What could I do? I touched the black card in my pocket. How much was on it? Was it enough? I had no idea. Even if it was, could I use it? It was her money. Using her money to save her company. What would that even accomplish? Time was ticking away. The soup was ready. I ladled a bowl, blew on it to cool it, and carefully carried it upstairs. Isabella was awake, leaning weakly against the headboard. She looked startled to see me with the bowl. You made this? Yeah, eat it while it's hot. It's good for you. I held the bowl out to her. She didn't take it. She just stared at me. You know about the company? She asked. I nodded. Do you think I'm pathetic? A failure? Her voice trembled. No. I shook my head. I think you're incredible for holding on this long by yourself. Her eyes immediately welled up. The indestructible Ice Queen, at that moment, looked utterly vulnerable. Eat, I said, holding a spoonful to her lips. She didn't resist, letting me feed her like a child. After she finished the soup, some color returned to her face. "Leo," she said, looking at me seriously. "Thank you, but it's no use. At 3 o'clock, it's all over." "It's not 3 o'clock yet," I said. She gave a bitter smile. "You think money just grows on trees? 500 million. Where am I supposed to get that?" Seeing the despair on her face, my decision became crystal clear. I stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the sky, which had cleared after the storm. Then I turned back to her, my voice calm and firm in a way that felt foreign even to me. I said something I never thought I would say. "It's only 500 million. I'll handle it." When the words "I'll handle it" came out of my mouth, Isabella looked at me like I'd just grown a second head. Her jaw went slack, and she couldn't speak for a full minute. What did you say?" I said. "I'll take care of the money," I repeated. I almost had to laugh at myself. Me, a guy who paid his bills on an installment plan, boasting about solving a $500 million cash flow problem. It was the biggest bluff I'd ever attempted. But looking at Isabella's pale, hopeless face, I couldn't stand to see her suffer. She stared at me for a few seconds, then let out a sad, self-deprecating laugh. "Leo, thank you. I know you're trying to make me feel better, but this isn't the time for jokes." She clearly thought I was just trying to comfort her. I didn't explain. Actions speak louder than words. I pulled out my phone and, right in front of her, dialed a number I never in my life thought I would call. It rang for a long time before someone picked up. A gruff, authoritative voice answered. "Who is this?" "Grandfather, it's me." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. On the other end of the line was the man I had only ever seen in photographs. My grandfather, the patriarch of the Evans family, a titan of industry who had supposedly retired to a quiet life. My parents died when I was young, and my grandmother raised me. I always thought she was my only family. It wasn't until she was on her deathbed that she told me the truth. My father was the illegitimate son of the Evans family from New York. He had run away with my mother after the family forbade their relationship, and they both died in an accident. The Evans family never acknowledged my existence. My grandmother gave me a phone number and told me I could call it if I was ever truly desperate, but she hoped I would never have to, because calling that number meant giving up my quiet life and stepping into the complicated, gilded world I had never known. I had buried that number in my memory, never intending to use it. But today, for Isabella, I was breaking that promise. The line went silent. After a long pause, the old man's voice came back, with a tremor I almost missed. "Is that you, Leo?" "It's me. You finally called." His voice was a mix of emotions, relief, guilt, and a strange excitement. "Grandfather, I need your help," I said, cutting to the chase. "I need $500 million. In cash. I need it before 3 p.m. today." Silence again. Even I knew how insane it sounded. A grandson he hadn't spoken to in over 20 years calls out of the blue and asks for $500 million. If it were me, I would have hung up, assuming it was a scam. But he didn't. He just asked one question. "Is this for a girl?" I froze. "How'd he know?" "Yes," I admitted. "All right." His answer was just one word, but it landed with the weight of a mountain. "Give me the account number. The money will be there in 30 minutes. And then he hung up. I stood there, holding my phone, my mind reeling. That was it. He just agreed. Next to me, Isabella was completely petrified. She had heard the entire conversation. Grandfather, the Evans family from New York, 500 million. She stared at me, her eyes a swirling vortex of shock, confusion, and disbelief. The part of her brain that processed logic had just short-circuited. She thought I was just a clever, normal guy. Then she thought I was a reclusive genius enjoying the simple life. She never, in her wildest dreams, imagined my background was this. Terrifying. The Evans family of New York. They were an institution, a dynasty that dwarfed her family, that dwarfed the Sterling and Vance families combined. They were at the absolute peak of the pyramid. And I was one of them. Her entire worldview had just been shattered. She looked at me. The man who cooked for her, gardened with her, who panicked over a single kiss, and saw a total stranger. Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling. I looked at her, unsure how to answer. Just then, her phone rang. It was her CFO, his voice cracking with emotion. "Ms. Sterling. Ms. Sterling. Our corporate account. There's been a $500 million wire transfer. It came. It came directly from the Evans Corporation in New York. It felt like a bomb went off in the room. Isabella's mind went blank. She just stared at me, her expression unreadable. I quietly picked up the bowl of now-cold soup from her nightstand. The soup's cold. I'll go heat it up. And with that, I left the room, leaving her alone to process the aftershock. The $500 million was like a defibrillator for the dying Sterling Industries. With that capital, Isabella launched a ferocious counterattack. She directed the trading floor herself, waging all-out war against Chad's short sellers. The stock price shot up from its floor, broke even, and then climbed into the green. For the rest of the afternoon, the entire business world watched the bloodless battle unfold. I, meanwhile, was in the kitchen trying to figure out how to make scrambled eggs with tomatoes. A patient needs a balanced diet, after all. By 4 p.m., it was over. Chad's coalition had been completely wiped out by the tidal wave of cash. They were ruined. Sterling Industries not only recovered all its losses, but hit a new all-time high. Isabella had won. It was a clean, decisive, legendary victory. That evening, she came home. The exhaustion was gone, replaced by a radiant glow. She was the queen again, confident and in command. She walked into the kitchen and saw me, wearing an apron, struggling with an egg. "I'm home," she said. "Okay, wash up. Dinner's almost ready." I slid the slightly burnt scrambled eggs onto a plate. She didn't move. She just stood behind me, watching. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. "Tell you what? Who you are." I took off the apron and sighed. "Boss, that's not important. What's important is that we won." "We." She seized on the word, a flicker of light in her eyes. "Yeah, we." I nodded. Suddenly, she wrapped her arms around me from behind, holding me tight. My body went rigid. There goes the contract again. But this time, I didn't push her away. "Leo, thank you," she whispered into my ear, her voice thick with emotion. "Don't mention it. It's what an employee does," I said, trying to sound casual. She chuckled softly into my shoulder. "As of today, you're no longer my employee," she said. My heart dropped. "You gotta be kidding me. The crisis is over, so she's firing me? What about my 30 million? Then what am I?" I asked nervously. She pulled away and turned me to face her. Her beautiful eyes seemed to be filled with starlight. "You're my man." Those 3 words hit me harder than the $500 million. I just stood there, stunned into silence. Seeing my dumbfounded expression, Isabella's smile widened. "What, you don't want the job?" she teased. "No, it's just, boss, the contract." I stammered, making one last, desperate stand for professionalism. "The contract is terminated." She pulled the document from her purse and, right in front of me, ripped it in half. "From now on, there's no Party A or Party B. Just Isabella and Leo." She ripped it so casually. My heart ached. That was $30 million worth of paper. "But my salary?" I asked quietly. "My company, my house, it's all yours." "What do you need a salary for?" she declared. I was speechless. So I'd gone from employee to kept man? No, wait. This was the male equivalent of a Cinderella story. Looking into her eyes, which clearly said, "Don't you dare say no," I wisely chose to shut up. Resistance seemed futile. And besides, I didn't think I really wanted to resist. From that day on, everything changed. I was no longer the contract husband. I was officially Mr. Evans. Isabella was no longer my cold boss. She smiled at me. She was playful with me, and she leaned on me. She introduced me to all her friends and business partners. Every time, she would hold my arm and say proudly, "This is my husband, Leo." The same people who used to sneer at me now greeted me with deferential smiles and a respectful, "Mr. Evans." Chad went bankrupt. He lost everything and was drowning in debt. I heard he was working construction somewhere. His father was kicked off the board, and Isabella became the one and only queen of Sterling Industries. And I was her king, a king whose primary duties were still planning meals and tending to our small vegetable garden. Life seemed to be heading toward a storybook ending, but I couldn't shake a feeling of unease. A huge secret still lay between us, my identity. In her eyes, I was the mysterious heir to the Evans fortune, a man who could do anything. Only I knew the truth. I was just a regular guy who made one phone call. The $500 million wasn't my power. It was a family connection I never wanted. I was afraid. Afraid that one day she would find out and feel like I had deceived her. I was afraid that the man she loved was the omnipotent tycoon she had imagined, not the real me, the guy who could barely make scrambled eggs. That fear was a thorn in my side. News of our marriage eventually reached the Evans family in New York. Before long, a private jet landed on the helipad at Isabella's mansion. My grandfather stepped out. He looked older than in the photos, but his eyes were just as sharp. He was flanked by a team of bodyguards in black suits, a far more intimidating entourage than Isabella's. "Grandfather," I said, bracing myself. "Humph." He nodded, his gaze skipping right over me to land on Isabella. He looked her up and down, his expression critical, as if he were appraising an asset. Isabella didn't flinch. She met his gaze head-on. "Mr. Evans, it's a pleasure to meet you." "So you're the Sterling girl," the old man said, his voice quiet but heavy with authority. "Not just anyone can marry into the Evans family." The air grew thick with tension. I knew this was a test for both of us. "Grandfather," I said, stepping in front of Isabella, "she's not the Sterling girl. She's my wife, Isabella." My grandfather's eyes narrowed. Feeling confident, "Are we?" Daring to talk back to me. "I'm not talking back. I'm telling you my choice," I said, looking him straight in the eye. "I admit, I used your help to solve her problem, but I owed her that. From now on, I will stand with her my way, whether you approve or not. She is the woman I choose." It was the first time I had ever stated my intentions so clearly. Not for a contract, not for money, but for the woman standing behind me. When I finished, the courtyard fell silent. My grandfather stared at me, his expression unreadable. Behind me, Isabella squeezed my hand. It was ice cold. I could feel her fear and her gratitude. After a long moment, my grandfather suddenly broke into a laugh. "Ha ha, excellent. That's my boy. You've got my spirit." He walked over, clapped me hard on the shoulder, and then looked at Isabella with a newfound approval. "You've done well, girl. You finally managed to polish this rough stone of mine." I was speechless. Isabella was speechless. Neither of us saw that coming. "All right, I just came to see how things were. Since you two are happy, I can rest easy," my grandfather said, turning to leave. "Grandfather, won't you stay for dinner?" I asked. "Can't. Got a pile of work waiting for me in New York." He waved his hand without looking back. "Oh, and kid, don't think I don't know what's eating you. You're afraid she'll find out you're just a normal guy, aren't you?" I froze. "How did he—" "Let me tell you something." His voice echoed from across the lawn. "The person who truly loves you doesn't love your background or your power. They love you. If you don't even have the confidence to believe that, then you don't deserve a girl this good." With that, he boarded the jet. It roared to life and disappeared into the sky. I stood there, replaying his last words in my head. "The person who truly loves you." Loves you? I turned to look at Isabella. She was already looking at me, a smile in her eyes. You heard all that?" I asked, embarrassed. "I did," she nodded. "So you—" "Leo," she cut me off, stepping forward to straighten my collar. "Do you really think the man I love is the Evans heir who can produce $500 million on demand?" I said nothing, which was an answer in itself. She smiled. "I admit I was shocked that day. But you know what? I had already fallen for you long before that. I fell for the man at the gala who said, 'The signal is always simple,' with that ridiculously serious look on his face. I fell for the man who was shirtless in the garden, teaching me how to use a hoe. I fell for the man who fed me soup when I was sick and took care of me, even though he had no idea what he was doing. And I fell for the man who, after one kiss, could only think about getting his salary docked." With every sentence, she took a step closer. Finally, she stood on her tiptoes and whispered in my ear, "The man I love, from the very beginning, was just you, Leo. A little awkward, a little obsessed with money, but a very real man. My man." At that moment, my heart felt completely full. All the fear, all the doubt, just evaporated. I lowered my head and kissed her. This time, I wasn't thinking about the contract. I wasn't thinking about the salary. I was just thinking about her. Bonus scene late that night, in the study of the Sterling mansion. Arthur stood respectfully before the large desk. But sitting behind it wasn't Isabella. It was my grandfather, who was supposed to be halfway back to New York. "Sir, everything has proceeded according to your plan," Arthur reported. His demeanor was not one of awestruck admiration, but the unwavering loyalty of a subordinate to his commander. Good. My grandfather took a sip of tea. And the boy, how is he holding up? Perfectly, Arthur said with a hint of smile. He is kind, has integrity, he maintained his character in the face of temptation, and showed his backbone in a crisis. Most importantly, his feelings for Ms. Sterling are genuine. Your judgment, as always, was correct. Oomph. He's an Evans. What did you expect? My grandfather set down his cup, a sly, fox-like grin spreading across his face. Making him sign that ridiculous contract was the only way to temper his spirit. If he didn't experience a little hardship, how would he learn to appreciate what he has? It seems to have worked. Indeed, sir. However, Arthur hesitated. Ms. Sterling doesn't yet know that all of this was a test orchestrated by you. The contract, the corporate crisis, even her first meeting with Leo. Patience, Arthur. My grandfather waved his hand, a glint in his eye. Let them live in their little misunderstanding for a while longer. A little romance, a little mystery. It's good for them. Arthur smiled, understanding completely. Outside, the moon was bright. A contract marriage, meticulously planned by a master puppeteer, was only just beginning to reveal its true nature, long after everyone thought the story was over. End.